My name is Dwight Mahalitz. I'm president of Effective Managers. I'm very pleased to be with you today. And the topic is what separates high-performing organizations from those or which not. It's really a fundamental question, and there are a lot of things that can get in the way of good performance of organizations. But with my organization being Effective Managers, as you can imagine, I would like to talk about it from the perspective of managers. So I'll talk first a bit about the situation of managers today. I'll then move on to link this to the two characteristics of high-performing organizations, so the topic of this webinar. And then finally, I'll close with a few tips on how to establish these characteristics in organizations. So in my experience, people generally do want to do a good job, and managers are absolutely in that boat as well. But in spite of the best efforts of organizations, in spite of process improvements, systems changes, various initiatives of organizations, we find that managers are attending meetings that they shouldn't attend, they're reading emails that they shouldn't have to read, they're fighting jurisdictional battles that they shouldn't have to fight. So in other words, managers are being put in untenable situations. They're being asked to produce more with less, and they're getting pulled in many different directions. And it matters. It matters. There's multitudes of research that show it. I've pulled out two here. The first one is by Lee Branham, which shows that 70% of employees leave a job for reasons related to factors that are directly controllable by their managers. The Gallup organization, I just love the Gallup research because they base this on millions of manager direct report relationships and are now mining that data. And they find that work groups that are ineffectively managed are 50% less productive and 44% less profitable. So improving the performance of managers and improving the effectiveness of managers directly translates into organizations getting better results. To me, the fundamental research in this area was published, I should say, in 1994 by James Heskett. He published this in Harvard Business Review, and this is the service profit chain. I think any manager has heard of that at one point or another in their work and their reading. And the thought is fairly simple when you think about it, but very profound when you look at the implications, and that is that employee satisfaction drives customer satisfaction, drives revenue and profit of organizations. So in other words, the more satisfied that employees are, the higher the lifetime value of a client to the organization, which increases profit and increases revenue, of course, for the organization. What's not as well referred to is very clear in this original 1994 article, is that leadership practices need to underpin this entire service profit chain. So what drives satisfied employees? Of course, it's their managers, because the manager is the most important relationship in the organization. The manager is the filter, if you will, between decisions that are made higher in the organization, and is also the conduit between the employee and the rest of the organization that is higher. So this research has stood the test of time, but I think it's often forgotten the importance of the leadership practices in ensuring that organizations are as successful as they can be. So to understand this better, sort of these manager relationships, and to understand what's getting in the way of managers being as effective as they could, we entered into a major research project with the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottawa during 2012 and 2013. We just wrapped that research up at the end of 2013. And one of the things that we wanted to do was actually quantify how effective managers feel they are. There was no published scientific research doing that to this point in time. And here are the results. To me, it's profound. That's 55% of managers' time is spent doing value-added work, which means 45% of that time, 45% of that time is spent doing things which are not directly related to the job. We dig into this a bit deeper in the actual research, and we find that 20% of their time is spent doing things that that they don't feel they were hired to do. This is the list I gave you about going to meetings they don't have to go to and fighting jurisdictional battles, those kinds of things. But they're also spending 26% of their time on work that could be delegated to a qualified administrative support position. So this is completely consistent with other anecdotal material that I've read on this, but this is the first time I've seen where it's actually been documented in a research project. So if you think about it, that's over 2 days a week. So it's like managers are starting their work week after a mid-morning coffee break on Wednesdays. So what is the main driver of manager effectiveness? It comes down to this one word, which is accountability. So delegated accountability in the workplace is the main driver of managers' self-perceived effectiveness. And if you see the correlation there, it's 0.74. In social sciences, this is a very high percentage. A correlation of 1 means a perfect correlation. A correlation of 0 means that there's no correlation. So a correlation of 0.74 means there's a very high relationship between accountability and managers' perceived effectiveness. So what is accountability? There's a much longer answer to this, and in fact I have a whole webinar which has been dedicated, to accountability. So that is available for download on the Effective Managers website. But for the purposes of this webinar, I'll give you the one-line definition, and that is that accountability is an obligation for which one can be held to account for one's results and one's actions by a specified other. So there's 3 aspects to that are important. The first one is that there's an obligation. The individual feels accountable, so there's this feeling of obligation. The second aspect is that it's accountability for results and actions. So it's not only what is done, but how that work is being done. And then the third part is this concept of a specified other, and that's critical. So accountability cannot be internally driven. The word I would use for that is responsibility. So accountability is where a specified other can hold you to account. But what does accountability mean in practical terms in the organization? Because this takes us to the heart of the webinar today. So really what drives people in organizations to do productive work that contributes to organizational performance? We've all seen this word, and this is one way of delegating accountability in the organization, so command and control. And we know that doesn't work. In today's organizations, there's too much requirement for speed and flexibility of decision making. So you can't wait for the top, the CEO and the CEO's executive team to make every decision, wait for that decision to filter down to the bottom of the organization before action can be taken. So we know that the command and control mechanism does not work in organizations. And the reason I start with this one, though, is that there's often a confusion between accountability framework, which is how accountability is delegated down the organization, and this concept of command and control. So I put this here to say that when I talk about accountability frameworks in this webinar, I'm not talking about a command and control structure. So if we go to the other end of the continuum, though, you talk about autonomous or self-managed teams in organizations, and this is quite popular right now. But that there's something magical about being self-empowered, and that they're going to be able to everybody in the organization, if they have this empowerment, they can go about doing their work, and in some way, then the consolidation of all of that work is going to end up in the results that the organization wants. So now, don't get me wrong on this one. Empowerment is good, but empowerment can't be successful if it's in a vacuum, because while I'm a fundamental believer that everyone will want to do their best and they will have best intentions, but if they're working in that vacuum, they won't have the context that they need to be able to to make decisions in a consistent way so that everyone in the organization is working in the same direction and pulling the organization in the same direction. The example I like to give in this one is vectors in physics. It's a fairly simple class that is taught in, it was high school in my day. It's probably elementary school nowadays. But if you think about it, if two forces are pulling in exactly the same direction, then they double the output. If they're working in the opposite directions, then there's actually zero output. So if you have autonomous teams that are not working within context, they're going to be pulling in different directions, and the organizational effort therefore is diffused. The whole organization is not being pulled in the direction that the strategy would indicate that the organization should be moving in. So why do people in organizations then do what other people tell them to? So if you have an accountability and authority framework, if context is set by managers and work is delegated down the organization, this is but in any definition, this is a manager delegating work to direct reports and asking them to do that. So we live in a free society where people decide what we want to do with our time. So what drives individuals to legitimize the authority of the manager to tell them what to do and how to spend their time during their work hours? So one reason is that people need to earn a living. So if we don't do our job, someone else will. But I personally don't believe that compensation is the only driving force, because if it was, then work wouldn't be done with the level of capability or the initiative necessary for high performance. And in many organizations you have high performance. In all organizations people are paid, but in some organizations are higher performing than others. So something else needs to be at play. And I think that something else is that this whole concept here, oops, I'm sorry, I got in the wrong direction, is this whole concept of trust and respect. So how do we establish a trusting and respectful relationship in organizations to ensure that managers can properly delegate and manage their subordinates? So this needs to happen at every level of the organization. And it needs to happen in such a way that managers can establish that respect and trust. Interestingly, and this is a bit of research by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, only 29% of employees think that trust in senior management is strong at their workplace. So managers in general are not trusted. So why is that? What is the reason for that lack of trust in organizations? And I would say that the answer lies somewhere in the middle. That between the command and control on the one side and the self-managed teams on the other side, there's a balance that the CEO needs to determine, because it would be somewhat different for each organization, that will actually create an environment in which managers can engender the kind of trust that's necessary to make this organization work in the most high-performing way possible. And there are two factors that are at play. So the two factors are organization design and talent management systems. As with anything else in this world, if something's worth doing, it takes some effort to get it done. The results of the research that I quoted show that it's not simple to do. Because if it was simple to do, everyone would be doing it, and yet the research shows that managers are only working at 55% effectiveness. So CEOs need to put in place the right foundation, and this requires work on both of these tracks. One track is to make sure that you have the right number and nature of levels of work in the organization. And the second track is to ensure that you have people that are fully capable to work at that level of complexity in the organization. So I'd like to talk about each one of these for a few minutes. So first about organization design, and then second I'll move on to the talent management systems, and then we'll wrap this up. So in organization design, there's a lot of myths around organization design, and in fact, there are scientific methods that are available to determine the right number of layers for an organization. So it's partly what are the right number of layers. So for the strategy that I have and the complexity of the work that I have in this organization, and for the size of this organization, which also drives complexity, how many layers of management do I need? And the job of those layers of management is to ensure that the strategic decisions that are made at the top of the organization are appropriately communicated, chunked up into appropriate size pieces for delegation down the organization, monitored, managed, coached, and so on. And then the second part of it is the right alignment of functions. So how do I align my functions for the complexity of this work? So the alignment of functions is a whole other topic, but for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to focus in on complexity of work and the right number of layers. So if you think about it, work gets more complex as one gets higher in the organization. And higher level positions are paid more to recognize the increased value that they provide to the organization and to acknowledge that there's a higher level of complexity of that work. So complexity of work can be determined. I mentioned that there is a scientific method for doing this. It was developed by Elliot Jacks in the 1950s, and there's hundreds of bodies of research that are reinforcing this over the years by thinking about the time span of discretion for a position. So how far into the future do I have accountability for delivering something? So if we start at the front line, in most organizations, most workers come in and they're delegated work which they can do within that day. So if you're in a bread factory, you come in, you join the line, you follow a procedure, and you do the work that is necessary to do. You do your absolute best during that day, but at the end of the day, your work is done and you go home. If you move up to the next level of the organization, the first line manager, in some organizations, these would be professional level individual contributors. But at this level of the organization, work will be delegated that takes longer to complete. So a first line manager might be asked to do an improvement in the way a process takes place at the front line. So improving a process might take 3, 4, or 5 months to do the analysis, to diagnose what the solution might be, to come up with a proposal, get that approved, and then implement it over that period of time. It might even go out as far as a year. Similarly, director work gets more complex, and then up to vice president work, which might go out 2, 3, 4, even 5 years into the future in terms of expanding a product line onto another continent and so on. So I say all of this just to really make it clear that there is a different level of complexity at each level in the organization. And actually, I'll move on to the next slide for this one. So the work at each level then of a properly designed organization is quite different. It's different in the nature of the complexity of the work for that role, but it's also different in terms of the nature of the capability of the work that needs to be done for success in that role. So if you think about it from the organization side, it's complexity of work. If you think about it from the people side, it's capability to do that work. And it's important to understand this because very often in organizations, the best performer at one level of the organization is the one that is promoted to be the manager when there's a vacancy at the manager level for that team. And that can often be a mistake because the best performer at one level may be in fact the person that's ideally suited to do that work. They have the capability to work at that level, they have the skills and knowledge, and they have the application, or they value the work that they're doing at that level. If you promote them to the next level and they don't have the capability to do work at the next level up, they may fail because they won't have the capability to add the value at the next level of the organization that is required for that managerial position. And the key issue here is that capability cannot be trained. You cannot train a frontline worker to have the capability to be a frontline manager. And the reason for that is that someone that has the capability to work on the front line is very good at and can work within procedures and follow procedures completely well. At the next level up, you need to have that capability to do the diagnosis for that diagnostic work that's there, and you can't train someone that does not have that capability to be able to do that work. So managers need to be able to recognize that and then assign people to roles using those criteria. So that kind of moves on to the talent pool review side of it, because the CEO's desire in this would be to ensure that throughout the organization there's a system to ensure that you're getting the right people with the right capability, with the right skills of knowledge, and valuing the work so that they will apply themselves to that work into the right positions. So this is then figuring out how do you understand what is the capability required for the job so that they can handle the complexity at that level, and then taking into account skills and knowledge and valuing the work and so on. This again is a fairly detailed topic, and the webinar I gave 2 weeks ago focuses in specifically on this area. So that has been posted on the web recently. So there's more information available on this area as well. So then, I've put together an example here, because this closes the loop and brings together the complexity and capability thoughts of this area of work. So if the manager of the team doesn't have the additional capability and the right skills and the application to really add value to the work of the members of their team, then what happens is that the members of the team don't have trust that their manager is going to be able to make the decisions that they need for them to be successful in their work. So in this example, I've drawn a very simplified organization, a CEO, 3 vice presidents, and 3 teams at the director level. So if you have a director who has a VP that's not operating at the capability for the vice president level of work, and they have a problem that they can't solve, they would go to the vice president to ask for a solution. The VP not having that higher level capability will over time be seen by the director as more of as it being more of a peer relationship, because in fact they're working at the same level of complexity in the organization, even though one has the VP title and one has the direct title. So here the director then sees the CEO as the quotation marks real boss in this organization, because they know that for the complex problems that need to be solved for the director to be successful in his or her work, that the CEO makes those decisions because the vice president doesn't have the capability. At the end of the day, this creates a situation where the directors in that team are not receiving the right context from their vice president, because that extra level of capability to translate the strategy as delegated from the CEO to the VP into strategic objectives that the VP must deliver, and then chunking that up into smaller pieces for delegation down to the director level, does not happen in an appropriate way. So it in fact becomes a waste of money, because the CEO ends up being the manager of fact for that particular team. So as you see on the left, then we have the increasing complexity of work as one goes up the organization, and on the right-hand side we have the increasing capability of managers as it goes up the right-hand side of the organization. The final point I wanted to make on this slide, it's kind of in the parenthetical comments on the right-hand side, and that is that it's also very important to take into account the skills and knowledge, because every position in the organization requires different skills and knowledge for success. And I use those 2 words specifically because I'm not a big fan of using things like education, experience, and competencies for applying people to positions, because they're simply not precise enough. So knowledge is the knowledge to be able to to do the work, it has several different aspects of it, and then the skills are more the technical skills in terms of how does one apply that knowledge into the work that's necessary. And then the application is valuing the work sufficiently that they will apply themselves fully to the work in front of them. I'll come back. One of my favorite parts is the oh, thank you, Craig, for the question. I'll come back to that in a second. So this all comes back to a situation where we can create the empowerment for subordinates to make decisions and take initiatives that are consistent within the overall strategy of the organization. So the example I gave is a frontline manager. If the highly competent worker is promoted to be the frontline manager and takes it because it's a promotion but doesn't really value the work of managing, they're not going to apply themselves to the coaching, and they're not going to apply themselves to the training and to the administrative work related to management and the holding of meetings and so on. So that becomes a really important dimension that can't be forgotten. So in summary then, effective managers are essential to driving organizational performance. Organizations need a foundation of the right organization design and a talent pool review system to get the right people into the right positions. And effective managers need the right balance of problem-solving capabilities, skills and knowledge, and application. And this all comes together to create a situation where managers can earn the trust and respect of team members. So I have just a couple of slides left. I have a question from one of the participants. This sounds similar to the challenges of succession planning. Do you provide a webinar for this or a straightforward solution? I don't have a webinar developed specifically for succession planning at this time, but I love that idea, and I do have some articles that refer to that, but not in a direct way. So I will follow up with you by email with that after the webinar with a couple of links, and I'll put it on the list for a future webinar. I like that idea. So to wind it up, I just did want to say a couple of words about the Effective Managers Survey. This is the survey that we developed coming out of the research project, and I found the research results just so strong that I was I almost felt compelled. I guess compelled is a good word, to create this as a tool that can help CEOs assess in their organization the effectiveness of managers and those things that are getting in the way of managers being effective as possible. And what I've found is that the Effective Managers Survey focuses in on those issues from a manager perspective, so really gets much more to root cause. So, for example, in most employee engagement surveys, actually every one I've ever seen, communication comes up as a problem area. So if you think about it, then the organization goes back, puts communication plans in place, but the next year communications is still a problem. And the reason for that is that the communication is a symptom of a more fundamental problem, and the more fundamental problem is that managers aren't doing an appropriate job of setting context for direct reports. And context includes what decisions were made higher in the organization that affect your work, what are the implications of strategic directions on my work and therefore for your work, and providing the right-sized information to direct reports when they need it. So if a direct report isn't getting the information that they need to make their decisions, they say, oh gosh, we've got poor communication here. I just found out the executive team made this decision. I wish I would have known that 3 weeks ago. So it's not really a failure of communication, it's a failure of the manager to do their work, and the accountability and authority framework helps to alleviate that. So just in closing then, thank you very much for your attention. Just to point out that there are a lot of free resources on the effectivemanagers.com website. Please do browse through that. You can sign up for a monthly newsletter on the website. And if you're interested in daily management tips, please follow me on Twitter. I try to get 2 or 3 things up a day on my Twitter account. I thank you very much for your participation today. I will follow up with you, Craig, on your specific question question. And if anyone else has any other questions, please do feel free to follow up with an email, and I will be back to you soon. That brings us to a close. Thank you very much for your time. Hi, I'm Dwight Mahalitz, President of Effective Managers. Thank you so much for downloading the webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it and will find it useful. Feel free to check out other parts of the website for interesting downloads. Most are free, some are at a nominal charge, but I'm sure you'll find lots of interesting tools there and things that can help you be more effective. And in fact, that's what my job is. My job is to help you, help your organization be higher performing. The bottom line is that I want to start where you are, understand your problem, and provide services that can help you solve that problem and implement a solution as quickly and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Give me a call, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you, talk about your situation, and see if there's anything that we can do together. Thank you.